Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
First of all, this is not a freedom agenda administration. That's one thing that's been made clear by President Trump's muddled and money-driven response to the apparent killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Now, Trump reached for rationalization as evidence against Saudi Arabia piled up. And then he said this.
I don't like the concept of stopping an investment of $110 billion into the United States. Because you know what they're going to do? They're going to take that money and spend it in Russia or China or someplace else.
Now, forget for a minute the cost-benefit analysis he's doing with a man's life. The number alone is worth scrutiny. So when Trump first mentioned this military deal back in May of 17, it was $380 billion. The military component, $110 billion. The Brookings Institution immediately called it fake news, and here's why. They're mostly memorandums of intent. 6 items actually made it to Congress, adding up to $28 billion. And all but one dated from the Obama administration. So when you look at the arms sales actually considered by Congress, that number drops to about $14 billion. And even if these promises do convert to cold, hard cash, their payments are scheduled far into the future. So no wonder the Washington Post calls it a wish list. So what about Trump's claim that Russia or China will do the deals if we don't? According to Brookings, it would take decades for the Saudis to transition their hardware. So that's not really an issue. The real concern is Trump's cozy personal, political, and financial relationship with the Saudi royals. The U.S.-Saudi alliance stretches back decades and held fast even when their policies run counter to American values and interests. But Team Trump bet even bigger on the kingdom. His first foreign trip was to Saudi Arabia, and they rolled out the red carpet, as well as this creepy orb. Trump more than returned the favor, though, telling the Saudis he'd take a more hands-off approach.
We are not here to lecture. We are not here to tell other people how to live, what to do, who to be.
Behold the Trump doctrine, folks. He may call it sovereignty, but it's seen by dictators as a big green light. Do business with the U.S., and you can do what you want with human rights. We don't even have an ambassador. Trump outsourced that job to his son-in-law, who the Crown Prince reportedly bragged was in his pocket. The ties are financial as well. According to PolitiFact, the Saudis spent more than $250,000 and counting at the Trump Hotel in Washington. And Trump properties in New York and Chicago have beat downward trends with Saudi business, according to the Washington Post. So when Trump said Khashoggi may have been done in by rogue killers, it certainly seemed like he was trying to give the Crown Prince an out. All the more embarrassing that, according to CNN's reporting, the Saudis seemed to be ready to admit that the journalist was killed in an interrogation gone wrong. But we'll see if the president's promised severe punishment is to come. But it's worth asking why a hugely inflated Saudi arms deal is worth selling out America's moral authority.
It is Thursday, October 18th of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, a little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Well, you know, after listening at the top there, that Trump is only lying about the Saudi arms deal because he is an accomplice to murder. And I don't say that lightly. I may not be joking. And it may prove out that he is. And what do we do about it? Can a sitting president be indicted for murder if it's within the arc of his foreign policy? They might be able to cite evidence in previous administrations where, maybe it's okay. But a U.S. permanent resident working for a U.S. newspaper, and he knew about it beforehand, and they always torture and kill the messengers the way they do. I'm reminded of Lorca. I'm reminded of Victor Yara. What is it about smashing the hands, cutting off the fingers of the poets, the journalists, the balladeers? What is it about that? Kill the messenger. And if we want to give ourselves as an extension of what Trump is doing, he's doing it in our name. Though I don't think he feels it that way. He's really doing it for him. And there's people that love him for it. And they'll vote for him again. And they're making sure that none of us will be able to vote, or few of us will be able to vote. They're working hard, aren't they? So hard. Now, I was asked if I would listen to a tape of the Khashoggi murder, and I only have one answer to that, and that is no. I don't care to. I don't like to look at any of those. I don't like to hear any of it. I've heard enough. Okay? And in some instances, in terms of what a human being can do to another human being, I've seen what the results of that in my travels around the world. I don't need to hear or see these murders, the results of them. I already know. And I suppose it's important to have that out there. But I'll readily admit, I don't care to see that. Oh, so looks like Kushner and MBS were communicating through WhatsApp. So that means Mueller has it. Okay, well, a lot is going to come out in that. It may be Trump's Waterloo. Just might be. Okay, well, you know what? How many days do we have left until we have an election coming up? I'll tell you right now, because if you go to our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you'll find that. It is 19 days for 14 hours, 24 minutes, and 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10 seconds left until November is coming. So please do what you have to do to make sure that you will vote. Please do that. Okay, so what else? There's so much news out there. So much stuff happened overnight. One gets fairly deluged with it all. I know that the FBI is looking at the New York DEA's office, Cyrus Vance Jr., for taking bribes from the Trumps. Huh. Well, that doesn't look good. And who knows? It all comes to a head in the end. And what is up with the New York Times whitewashing Gavin McInnes? He is not a polite Nazi. All right? Let's be clear about that. And I don't get it. He can perform a ritualistic rendition of a suicide, or not a suicide, of a murder of a Japanese politician by a right-wing militant in Japan. Yeah, they took a sword and ran him right through. Eey. And he, McInnes, reenacted that. And he says that that's the proper way to deal with your opponents. And he's not kidding. So he does that, and Fox News runs that tape and says these leftists want to kill you. Their guy is waving a sword around, pretending about killing other people, and Fox News says it's the liberals. Okay. I guess that's how propaganda works. I guess that works on the poorly educated. But there's going to be a reckoning. And when November comes, the distant thunder will be heard, the rumble across the countryside. That will be the warning. That will be Gabriel's trumpet now, won't it? No wonder they're afraid. What's on the rest of the menu here today at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays? Well, here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, we're going to look at how Jared Kushner's Secret Service detail threatened a CBS reporter for asking Jared a question. There's a time and place for that. And apparently with Jared, there is no time and place to ask him a question. He doesn't take them. And he's got a Praetorian Guard making sure. U.S. Senator of Nevada, Dean Heller, pushed the VA to use an unproven brainwave frequency treatment marketed by a firm with ties to his office. Wow. Maybe that's what killed the Bunny Ranch pimp who was running for office. You never know. And several public funds with holdings in Facebook have backed a proposal to remove CEO Mark Zuckerberg as chairman. And not a moment too soon. After the break, we then move to the chef's table, where a GOP state lawmaker called hiking taxes on poor Pennsylvania families a significant win. Yeah. And a mysterious polio-like illness has spread to 22 U.S. states. And a mysterious polio-like illness has spread to 22 U.S. states, leaving over 120 children paralyzed. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Go to our homepage at netrootsradio.com. There are links there to determine if you are registered to vote and to register to vote. In many states, you can still register. So make sure that you can vote. And do please vote. Go to the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. The chat room link is on the rightish of the page, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Do check out her shows on Saturday at the table with Kelly Lincoln, 3 p.m. on the West Coast, and that's 6 p.m. on the East Coast. And then later on, she teams up with Ricky, and they command the Roundtable Roundhouse Power Hour from 9 p.m. on the West Coast, and that is a midnight on the East Coast, and that's for a whole power hour. Do check in with that. Take a gander over to the leftish from the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. The contribute button is there, and do please become a Patreon of Netroots Radio. Your generosity allows us to pay the bills and stay a little bit under the radar so we can continue resisting as, well, we're on a mission from God. Okay? Alrighty. You can follow the show on Twitter at Netroots Radio. We are on Facebook, so check us out over there. You can follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I also post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime, and I can be found there as Justice Putnam. You can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. And we are on Facebook, of course. And you can also pick up podcasts of the show by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. All right. So, this first article out of Alternet by Cody Fenwick, I don't know, raised my ire, shall we say? Because I always hate it when policemen don't know the law. Okay? And I also want to know another thing. Why is Jared having a present? I know he's like a kid. He's one of the kids. But I didn't know the Secret Service was supposed to be a Praetorian Guard. Now, are they? We shall see. A Secret Service agent blocked CBS reporter Errol Barnett from questioning Donald Trump's son-in-law and top advisor, Jared Kushner, as he exited a plane on Tuesday. Barnett tried to explain that he was a credentialed reporter, but the agent shot back, "I don't give a damn who you are. There's a time and there's a place." Probably while fingering his service revolver. Now, the Secret Service has said it is investigating the incident. But, you know, as soon as they're done with the prostitutes and the hangover, they'll get right on it. As Barnett pointed out on Twitter, where he posted a video of the encounter, it's not clear when this time and place is. Despite Kushner's work on high-profile foreign and domestic issues in a position obtained solely through blatantly corrupt nepotism, the first son-in-law is highly averse to responding to press inquiries and almost always refuses to sit for press interviews, even with a friendly outlet like Fox News. Because I think that there's mirrors in the cameras. Some of these cameras actually use mirrors still. And I got to tell you what happens when you're not from this earthly environs. What that does to a camera. It's not good. And I'm sure that he found that out before. And Kushner is of great interest than ever before, as the relationship with Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is throwing the U.S. Middle East policy into chaos. New revelations suggesting the prince or others in the regime intentionally had Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi murdered at the consulate in Turkey have drawn harsh criticism to the cozy relationship between the Trump administration and Saudi Arabia, which has been fostered to a significant degree by Kushner. Now, CNN reported yesterday, Wednesday, that Kushner has intentionally tried to avoid public scrutiny as the Khashoggi story has snowballed. As New York Times columnist Frank Bruni said of Kushner, America's own crown prince, he has his usual moral laryngitis. He's integral when there's the hope of credit, invisible when there's the certainty of blame. Isaac Arnsdorf of ProPublica brings us this next offering here at the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Senator Dean Heller, a Nevada Republican, pushed doctors at the Veteran Affairs Medical Center in Reno to adopt an experimental mental health treatment marketed by a company with ties to his office. Last December, on a Friday night of last December in his Reno office, Heller, a member of the Senate Veteran Affairs Committee, introduced VA officials to representatives from a healthcare startup called Surcare. The company markets an off-label method of treating addiction and post-traumatic stress using electromagnetic brain stimulation. Well, of course, Trump would like this. He wants experimental treatments done on unwitting suspects because he has a natural feel for science, like someone who doesn't know diddly about science, but if they got a lot of power, what diddly they know, they can use to hurt people, because that's what they do know. The meeting came about because two of Surcare's partners had a business connection to Heller's senior aide in Reno. "We've known her for years," one of the partners, Nino Pedrini, said of the aide, Glenna Smith. Pedrini and his partner have a separate joint venture with Smith's former employer. This was Glenna reaching out to us, knowing what we were doing, saying, "We think there's a fit here where you folks can help our veterans," Pedrini said. By helping those veterans, they're going to make money. And you know how you make money here? By not helping the veterans. Smith declined to answer questions about her role in arranging the meeting. She said she has never had a financial interest in Pedrini's companies. The Trump administration is encouraging the VA to use more alternative treatments, even though doctors and mental health experts caution against steering patients to procedures that haven't been scientifically demonstrated to be safe and effective. The administration's enthusiasm for such a experimental treatment has opened the door to a flood of hopeful vendors like Surcare. All right, it's like Ceres. Okay, Surcare. Heller declined to answer specific questions about the meeting. In a statement, he said he will never apologize for supporting policies that could lead to additional treatment options for Nevada veterans, because no one who has served this country should be waiting for care once they return to combat, and no one of us should be delayed in trying to make a buck off of them. I'm sorry, I had to finish a sentence for them. They never finish their sentences. Heller co-sponsored a bill directing the VA to start a pilot program on Surcare's procedure. Another of Surcare's partners, Judy Kosterman, participated in drafting the legislation. She said in an interview, "Oh yeah, I drafted that. Dean Heller, he doesn't know diddly about how to do this stuff. That's why we do it for him." Legislation in a box. We're here for them. Now, Kosterman described herself as Surcare's expert on the procedure, and her business card identified her as doctor. Now, she is not a physician, and her doctorate is in education, according to official records. And just let me tell you, between you and me, a doctorate in education just means that you can be a principal at a high school. Okay? You can't teach, not with an education degree. Well, at least in my old school construct, where you actually had a degree in that which you were teaching. I mean, if you're teaching math, it'd be nice to have somebody with a math degree. An education degree means that you can administrate. I know that there's people out there that are administrators, and they're probably doing what they think is God's work, but they're not teaching. And their expertise is not in subject matter, but it is in administrating. The bill says it provides no additional funding, so the pilot program would come at the expense of other treatments that are already proven to be effective, especially if they were effective during the Obama years. Because everybody knows whatever that guy did has to be erased from the face of the earth. every single bit of it. Last article here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursday is brought to us by way of Reuters with Arjun Panshatar reporting and Bernard Orr editing. But before I get into that, a little bit of news that came across the transom a little bit ago, and I need to mention now. One of the leading suspects in the Khashoggi murder has now conveniently died in an auto accident. Just leaving that out there for you, okay? And so one of those convenient auto accidents. Could have been a convenient heart attack or a convenient fall from a 5-story window moving a piano. And you don't own a piano or have anything to do with a 5-story building, but it's convenient. So you have on the one hand this convenient auto accident in which a leading suspect in the Khashoggi murder is dead. And then you have on the other hand a Montana GOP state official telling Trump supporters to bring guns. And literally, I'm not bring guns to a rally because they might have to shoot some liberals. All right, so here's some good news, though. I like to have some good news. Several public funds with holdings in Facebook Inc. backed a proposal to remove Chief Executive Officer Mark Zuckerberg as chairman. That's good news. The proposal, originally brought to the table by hedge fund Trillion Asset Management, is now backed by state treasurers from Illinois, Rhode Island, and Pennsylvania. New York City Comptroller Scott Stringer also joined the shareholder proposal. The proposal is asking Facebook's board to make the role of board chair an independent position. Well, let's get to our break, and when we come back, we will go through weather from around the world and then finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, another A Star is Born is born. We all know what happens when producers in Hollywood have a proven formula, so the success of the new A Star is Born shouldn't be a surprise. Counting a 1932 film with the same plot but a different title, this is the fifth iteration of this male-female celebrity relationship drama featuring an ascendant female star on a reverse career trajectory from her love interest. Between the 1957 one and the Streisand-Christopherson picture in '76, the stars went from the acting world to the music world as the latter's profile increased. Yes, the remakes do update, and in this new star there's a sort of interesting, if superficial, overlay of the rock versus pop thing going on within the standard pillorying of the cold, callous industry. As well, there's an update on gender roles in this one, and on the way alcoholism is treated. As a piece of movie making, this A Star is Born is fine. It's Bradley Cooper's directorial debut, and it's clear that he's picked up a thing or two in his storied career in front of the camera. He has a scene early on in a parking lot of an all-night grocery store where Cooper's rock icon Jackson coaxes an a cappella performance of some of Allie's original material. He's all a-gaga, pun intended, and this particular magic moment that's central to the picture is wonderfully captured. Pacing does become a minor issue in the film's second half, however. It's clear that this isn't Lady Gaga's last picture, and a tip of the hat is also due Sam Elliott as Jackson's much older brother. As long as celebrity and identity and the public's perception of it continue to define pop culture, this story will remain fascinating, and it's a safe prediction that in another generation or so, we'll have yet another A Star is Born. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. Healthcare isn't just a benefit of the modern human age. It goes way back, all the way even to the Neanderthals.
We imagine that they will have been cleaning wounds, dressing wounds.
Penny Spikins, a Paleolithic archaeologist at the University of York in the UK.
They may have used things like splints when you've got sort of broken limbs. We know they had some forms of painkillers.
And they most likely needed them, because remains of Neanderthals show that most individuals seem to have suffered a serious injury at least once. The key detail being that those injuries didn't always kill them. Spikins and her team cataloged more than 30 cases of Neanderthals who'd been injured but didn't die of their wounds to investigate the pattern of healthcare in pre-modern humans. And they concluded that healthcare may have been key to Neanderthals colonizing extreme environments and pursuing dangerous prey, like mammoths and woolly rhinos.
Healthcare wasn't just something cultural for Neanderthals. It also performed an ecological function. It allows them to punch above their weight as a predator.
Their conclusions are in the journal Quaternary Science Reviews. And the results are just one more reminder that Neanderthals shared many of the qualities we think of as uniquely human, except, of course, that they never made it out of the Pleistocene. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
This is an important message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. After a storm or disaster, it's important to eat only safe food. Throw away perishables like meat, poultry, fish, eggs, and leftovers stored above 40 degrees Fahrenheit for 2 hours or more. Throw away food with an unusual odor, color, or texture. Throw away food that may have come in contact with floodwater, including food in swollen, punctured, and damaged cans. When in doubt, throw it out.
This is a message from CDC.
After hurricanes, tornadoes, and floods, standing water and excess moisture help mold grow in your home, garage, and other structures. When you return to a home that has been flooded, know that you're likely to have mold. Mold puts your family's health at risk. If you have mold growing in your home, you should clean it up and fix other water problems, such as leaks in roofs, walls, or plumbing. Keep your children and pets out of affected areas until you've cleaned. Control moisture in your home to prevent mold growth. To remove mold growth from hard surfaces, use commercial products, soap and water, or a bleach solution of no more than 1 cup of household laundry bleach in 1 gallon of water. Follow the manufacturer's instructions. Never mix bleach with ammonia or other household cleaners. It will produce dangerous, toxic fumes. Open windows and doors to provide fresh air.
For more information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
The shameful truth about America's democratic process is that it's become so undemocratic that they don't want you to vote. By they, I mean the power elites who benefit by restricting the vote as tightly as possible to people who support their candidates and policies. We can wring our hands about the voter suppression that's suffocating the people's will, or we could join hands to support common-sense measures for voter expansion. It's an abomination that politicians rig the system to exclude legitimate voters, and those who do so should be publicly shamed and mocked for their pretension that they're, quote, protecting the integrity of the ballot box. All they're protecting is their political posteriors. It's time to unlock the voting booth doors. Some 6 million felons who've paid their dues should be restored to full citizenship. Provide automatic voter registration for every 18-year-old. Stop mass purges of voter rolls. Vote by mail. Provide extended and easy absentee voting. have election week rather than election day, accept any valid ID, vote where you live, restore the Voting Rights Act, pass a constitutional amendment to assure every eligible individual's right to vote, and invest fully in our nation's democratic infrastructure, including verifiable voting machines, multiple polling places within easy reach of all, an abundance of trained poll workers to eliminate lines and quickly resolve problems. This is Jim Hightower saying, and here's a crazy idea. Make voting fun, a festive occasion for the whole community. In Australia, for example, most polling places have barbecues. Why not add music, art, games, and other enjoyment to make voting a truly civic activity? America's democratic pageant doesn't have to be a grinding obstacle course, an intimidating experience, or boring. After all, it belongs to us. Let's make it better.
If you'd like more of Jim Hightower's real populism, check out the Hightower Lowdown. Jim's monthly newsletter gives you the real lowdown on which corporations, by name, are doing what to the middle class, our environment, and our democracy. Each month, the Hightower Lowdown brings you facts you didn't know, along with actions you can take to fight back. It also comes with a sense of humor. Hightower believes we can fight the gods and still have fun. Plus, get this, it's cheap. Only $15 brings you 12 issues a year. For real populism, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
You can help stop the Trump agenda in its tracks. Make sure you're registered to vote. Go to rockthevote.org. And on November 6th, vote for Democrats up and down the ticket. This message, a public service from all the fine people of netrootsradio.com.
White woman, mistakenly believing she was groped, calls police on a black boy.
I'm children's book author Jane Yolen, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
Recently, in a Brooklyn, New York deli, a 53-year-old white woman dialed 911 and reported to the police, quote, "I was just sexually assaulted by a child." The video taken inside the bodega shows something very different. What happened is this. A boy who is black and 9 years old, dressed in his school uniform and wearing a backpack, was inside the store. As he turned to talk to someone, his book bag brushed against the backside of the white woman, Teresa Klein, who then called the cops, causing the 9-year-old child and his friend to burst into tears, thinking he was about to go to jail. Ms. Klein, mitigating the situation a bit in a television interview later, said she was sorry. This incident is part of a much bigger story. Too often, police departments are used as instruments of oppression for biased callers. A longtime Flatbush resident who recorded the commotion outside the deli said, quote, "You think something like this only happens in the South, but it's all over the world." Yes, it is. It's a countrywide phenomenon and a countrywide disgrace.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because our children's freedom can't protect itself.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo briefs Trump Thursday morning on his meetings with Saudi and Turkish leaders over the disappearance and apparent death of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Criticism is mounting over the Trump administration's handling of the crisis, with many saying Trump seems more interested in providing cover for the Saudis than in finding out the truth. Turkish officials say they have evidence that Khashoggi was killed in Saudi Arabia's consulate in Istanbul and that many of the 15 Saudi men implicated in the incident have high-level ties to the Saudi government.
Saudi Arabia has been a very important ally of ours in the Middle East. They are an ally. We have other very good allies in the Middle East, but if you look at Saudi Arabia, they're an ally and they're a tremendous purchaser of not only military equipment, but other things. When I went there, they committed to purchase $450 billion worth of things and $110 billion worth of military. Those are the biggest orders in the history of this country, probably the history of the world. I don't think there's ever been any order for $450 billion. And you remember that day in Saudi Arabia where that commitment was made. So they're an important ally, but I want to find out what happened, and we will probably know that by the end of the week. But Mike Pompeo's coming back. We're going to have a long talk.
A man who lived across the river in Virginia. Why not send the FBI in to figure all this out?
Well, he wasn't a citizen of this country, for one thing, and we're going to determine that. And you don't know whether or not we have, do you?
Well,
No, but do you know whether or not we've sent the FBI?
Have you sent the FBI?
I'm not going to tell you.
Well, go ahead. Tell us.
Mr. President.
Why would I tell you?
Have you asked for this audio, video intelligence at the church?
We have asked for it if it exists. We have asked for it. Yeah.
But you haven't got it.
We've asked for it if it exists.
Are you surprised that they haven't turned it over? Or?
No, I'm not sure yet that it exists. Probably does, possibly does. I'll have a full report on that from Mike when he comes back.
Trump keeps talking about the $110 billion worth of military sales to the kingdom. That number is not accurate. Only $14.5 billion in weapon sales have been approved by the Trump administration and Congress. What Trump doesn't mention in his repeated defenses of Riyadh, the many tens of millions of dollars the Saudi royal family and its friends and allies have spent on Trump condominiums and at Trump hotels. Khashoggi's final column for the Washington Post, in which he advocates for freedom of the press in the Middle East, was published Wednesday night.
In the piece, Khashoggi writes, Arab governments have been given free rein to continue silencing the media at an increasing rate. There was a time when journalists believed the internet would liberate information from the censorship and control associated with print media. But these governments, whose very existence relies on the control of information, have aggressively blocked the internet. They have also arrested local reporters and pressured advertisers to harm the revenue of specific publications. The Arab world needs a modern version of the old transnational media so citizens can be informed about global events. More important, we need to provide a platform for Arab voices. We suffer from poverty, mismanagement, and poor education. Through the creation of an independent international forum, isolated from the influence of nationalist governments spreading hate through propaganda, ordinary people in the Arab world would be able to address the structural problems their societies face.
The deficit jumped to $779 billion in fiscal year 2018. That's up 17% from last year and the highest level since 2012. Republicans blame Democrats, saying they're resistant to cutting spending on social programs. Democrats point the finger at the GOP's massive tax cuts. So Trump told his cabinet to cut spending by 5%.
I'm going to ask each of you to come back with a 5% budget cut.
He once called himself the king of debt, but faced with an exploding federal deficit, President Donald Trump on Wednesday urged his cabinet to slash spending at their agencies by 5%.
I think you'll all be able to do it. Get rid of the fat. Get rid of the waste.
Trump's request coming after the Treasury Department this week reported a 2018 budget shortfall of $779 billion, the highest since 2012. The culprits? A big jump in military spending and stagnant inflows of revenue after deep tax cuts were pushed through by Republicans late last year. But with the economy humming along, Trump and fellow Republicans are blaming the budget gap on government spending programs known as entitlements, such as Medicare.
Oh, Canada.
National experiment is beginning north of the U.S. border as Canada becomes only the second nation in the world to legalize recreational marijuana after Uruguay. But some Americans are concerned that the U.S. is missing out on big money by not following suit.
And Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon agrees, issuing a statement that reads in part, quote, now that our neighbor to the north is opening its legal cannabis market, the longer we delay, the longer we miss out on a potentially significant economic opportunity for Oregon and other states across the country.
And that's a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener funded, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com/donate.
From UN headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 minutes.
The headlines are crowded with concerning human rights developments, from the possible murder of a critic of the Saudi monarchy to attacks on journalists around the world or a man-made famine in Yemen threatening millions of lives. Meanwhile, the U.S., once a vocal proponent of the international human rights architecture, has left the building. Just this year, the U.S. withdrew from the UN Human Rights Council and is threatening sanctions on international criminal court judges if they keep probing possible U.S. war crimes in Afghanistan. Malcolm Evans chairs the UN Subcommittee on the Prevention of Torture.
What has been notable and visible over the past few years is, to say, a general changing climate around human rights protections more generally. Increasingly, states do feel that it is not necessarily so problematic for them to be seen to be breaching some fundamental human rights if they determine that that is what their state is in their interests to do.
President Trump seems to sympathize with that premise. He used remarks at the UN in September to rally countries to defend against threats to sovereignty posed by global governance. Joel Simon, the executive director of the Committee to Protect Journalists, says Trump's attacks on the media are even less subtle.
His constant attacks, his fake news epithet, that's inspiring autocrats. That's inspiring repressive governments around the world. We should be inspiring the freedom fighters, not the dictators.
The U.S. does care about some rights abuses, though mostly in adversarial countries like Iran or Venezuela. UN Ambassador Nikki Haley has defended the media in Myanmar, where 2 Reuters reporters are languishing in jail, but Simon thinks those appeals resonate less than they once did.
Those kinds of entreaties would have more resonance if the President of the United States was not attacking the media in this country, calling it fake news, and calling it the enemy of the people.
Luke Vargas, The United Nations.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Yes, indeed. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently, 38 degrees Fahrenheit. We are slated to be a little cooler than yesterday. We're only going to be at 80. During the day, with overnight lows actually in the upper 40s. We'll see about that. And tomorrow we should be a bit warmer. It will be in the mid 80s indeed. Okay, so looks like low to mid 80s for through the weekend, and lows should be in the mid to upper 40s, and I say should be. Winds are currently negligible, 1 mile per hour out of the southwest, will remain light and variable throughout the day and through tomorrow. And once again, we do have a small chance of rain at the end of the weekend, and we would hope that that happens. Ragweed pollen is now considered low. The air quality index is good, down to 15 parts per million. And the daytime UV index has gone up a tick, is at moderate, and that is 3. So, barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.15 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles. And relative humidity is currently at 63%, but should lower a little bit as the day goes on. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 60 degrees and mostly cloudy. Paris is 66 and partly cloudy. Rome is 78 and sunny. Kiev is 66 and fair. Kabul is 55 degrees and fair. Hong Kong is 71 degrees and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 61 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia, though, is 64 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California is 53 degrees and partly cloudy. And New York is 44 degrees Fahrenheit and fair, with a small craft advisory on waterways wherever you are in the New York area, so take care. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Dan Desai Martin of Share Blue Media brings us this first offering here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Pennsylvania House Speaker Mike Turtsey, Repug, actually claimed that it was a significant win to hike taxes on millions of Pennsylvania families, a gaffe that might convince many voters not to send him back to Harrisburg. Turtsey may have coasted to a landslide victory just 2 years ago, but now he's struggling in a tight re-election battle with Democrat Emily Skopoff in the 28th House District. His tone-deaf views on the economy might be one reason why. Last year, Republicans in Congress passed a tax scam that lavished billions on Wall Street banks while leaving poor and middle-class families in the cold, literally. It was and still is deeply unpopular with voters, yet Turtsey praised Trump and Republican Senator Pat Toomey for helping pass the scam into law, calling it a significant win for Pennsylvania families. Well, it is a win for families if you only count the win for the very richest Pennsylvania families. Everyone else loses. When fully implemented in 2027, Pennsylvania's richest 1% would get an average kickback of almost $7,000, while the poorest 20% would see a tax increase of more than $100. Those in the second poorest and middle quintiles would see an average tax hike of $90. Yeah, it really does. You have to be rich to be poor in this country now. That's according to an analysis of the law by the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy, which shows the bill is a massive giveaway to the wealthiest Pennsylvanians, while coupled with a significant tax hike on the poorest. Well, they have to make up the revenue somewhere. Most families are not seeing an increase in their paychecks from the bill. Further, economic data shows wages are either stagnant or falling once adjusted for inflation, just as it's been since the Reagan years. When the bill Turtsey praised punishes working-class families, it's a boon for wealthy CEOs. Through multi-billion-dollar stock buyback schemes, rich executives are lining their own pockets at the expense of workers. In contrast to Turtsey, Pittsburgh Mayor Bill Perduto warned that the tax scam would have a negative impact on the region. That's because in order to pay for the massive tax breaks for the very wealthy, the tax bill increased the national budget deficit by a staggering $1.8 trillion with a T. Trillion. Perduto predicted that Republicans would try to fill the budget gap by cutting funding for health care programs like Medicaid. The economy's so bad we have to get it from somewhere, but we can't take it from the people we gave money to. I mean, they've already bought their yachts. I would say, why don't we just liquidate those yachts? But that's just me. Recently, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell proved Perduto right, announcing Republicans will cut health care funding in order to cover the costs of the unfair tax bill that Turtsey praised. In the end, Turtsey supports tax hikes on the poorest Pennsylvania families in order to heap unneeded tax breaks on the wealthiest 1%, all while putting jobs and health care at risk in southwestern Pennsylvania. No wonder so many voters are weighing the option of firing Turtsey on November 6th.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Martin Sismar of Raw Story brings us this last offering here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A polio-like illness that affects children is spreading across the U.S. and has now been found in 22 states. Acute flaccid myelitis, or AFM, mostly strikes children and affects the central nervous system. As of Tuesday, it had been found in 15 states. Today, that's 22, as the CD tracks up to 127 potential cases. 62 cases are confirmed. Yesterday morning, CNN brought Dr. Sanjay Gupta on to talk about the disease, which is still not well understood. Doctors know very little about the disease, Gupta said. We're not 100% sure yet. Kids may have a cold-like symptom, cough, congestion, and fever, and what is alarming and frightening is they suddenly develop weakness. And typically it's in an arm or leg, and you can look at the list of symptoms and it comes out of the blue. Other than muscle weakness without pain, there is not an obvious indicator that a child has been infected. At first, they were not sure the symptoms were real because it came so suddenly, and the weakness comes and oftentimes it persists. And that's when the parents take their child to go see the doctor for the treatments available. But that's the pattern. Sudden onset, painless weakness. These symptoms that are similar to cold-like symptoms with this particular virus, which is probably happening, is something is causing an inflammation within the spinal cord. Gupta continued, this disease is like a hit and run. You don't have evidence of the virus, but you have evidence of the aftermath, and that's why it's so hard to piece it together. The disease has left some children with paralyzed limbs. There is no known treatment other than physical therapy. It could be potentially deadly if the diaphragm is paralyzed because the child would be unable to breathe. No one knows how the disease is spreading, Gupta said. It's a bit of a medical mystery. We don't know if it's something contagious. Well, we'll map this out. And that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but we will be back tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Netroots Radio, of course, broadcasts on all through the day and all through the night for all the breaking news. So stay tuned to Netroots Radio for the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll visit with you tomorrow right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui coulent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, avoir un latte coeur. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin l'âge tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.